Hi, it's Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO here in beautiful Montreal, welcoming you to another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. We're part of Fractional Pros Canada, the home for Canada's fractional community, and you can find us on Facebook. We bring you conversations about everything fractional that matters for fractional executives and businesses from coast to coast. Think of this as your go-to spot for real talk, practical wisdom, and strategies you can actually use, all without the corporate fluff and with plenty of Canadian content. Whether you're a fractional pro or a business in our great country of Canada and beyond, this conversation is for you. Grab your espresso and let's dive in. Welcome to the Fractional Pros Canada podcast, where we explore everything fractional. We are powered by Your CMO, that's YOR CMO, the proven all-in-one framework for fractional CMOs. Learn more at yourcmo.com. I'm Robert Mendelson, and joining me today is Marina B. And I'm just saying B because I don't want to butcher it. Marina, pronounce your last name correctly, please.
It's Byezhanova. And you know, when I first moved to Canada, I considered changing my unpronounceable last name. Now I'm happy I have it because I'm the only Marina Byezhanova with that spelling on social media.
And perhaps that's part of your secret as being a personal branding ninja.
Part of the secret. And it's a question I get from people very, very frequently when they have more complicated names. Should I change the name? And listen, there's always a Gary Vaynerchuk, right, who didn't change the name and came up with some temporary nicknames but didn't change it. So it's part of the brand.
There you go. So if you haven't guessed yet, we're going to be talking about all things personal branding today and how we as fractionals can up our game of getting our brand out there. So welcome to the pod, Marina. Thanks for joining us. And let's start off. Tell us, what exactly is personal branding for fractional executive in particular, and why is it so critical to have good fractional branding as a fractional executive in today's market?
It is critical, but I'll start with a quick disclaimer. If you're listening to this and the term personal branding makes you cringe, you're not alone. There are a lot of leaders who feel that just the whole concept of I am branding myself feels narcissistic, feels uncomfortable, feels vain, and me, look at me type of thing. So if the term does feel that way to you, then in your head, switch it to leadership branding or switch it altogether to you building your visibility. And then what does having visibility mean, i.e. what does personal brand mean? Well, it means recognizability of your name and associations that your name has in people's minds. And then the question becomes, well, why is it valuable for fractional professionals to have visibility, to have their names recognized, to have people have those clear associations in their minds? Then it becomes a clearer question to answer than why do I need a personal brand, where a lot of people say I don't. That sounds gimmicky.
Okay, so let's say I'm a fractional executive. Maybe I'm just starting out. Maybe I've been running my business for a couple of years and things are starting to slow down, need to fill up the pipeline. And I say to myself, I haven't checked my LinkedIn profile for a while. Maybe that's where I should start. So A, is that where somebody should start? And B, where else should they be starting and what should they be looking at?
Right. So yes, so no. So the worst time to start building your brand or building that recognizability of your name is when you urgently need the benefits that come from having it, because it's a process. It's not an event. It's not a campaign. It takes time to build that recognizability. So number one. And number two, LinkedIn's not the place to start because that's tactical. And so often when people come to us, and we work with a lot of fractional leaders as well, when they come to us and say, I want to build my personal brand, I want to start creating content on LinkedIn. Well, the first question is, but what's your brand? What's your differentiator? What makes you interesting and compelling enough for people to start paying attention to you? Because there are a lot of people doing what all of us are doing. And when we try to compete just on credentials alone, no, it's not enough, right? There's always somebody more credible. But when we start figuring out, okay, well, what is my brand? What am I all about? What is an angle or point of view that I can bring to the world that is interesting, compelling, that's unique? And then around that, you build your whole strategy of how do you want to be perceived by others? How do I not want to be perceived? Who are those others? What are going to be my audiences? What are my key messaging points? What types of topics do I want to be associated with beyond my expertise? Because we can't just talk about our expertise all the time. It becomes too self-promotional. Then what are going to be the right platforms? LinkedIn likely is the correct platform because other business leaders are there. But that's the last piece. You figure out the platforms, then the plan of action. So the first step is figuring out, well, who am I? What's my brand? What am I putting out there in the world? Gives you also more confidence when putting yourself out there, and then execution follows later.
All right, let's double click on that, because I think a question a lot of people have is, I'm doing personal branding for my business, so how much of me, like you said, one of the questions is, who am I? Do we answer that question as, who am I as a person, or who am I as a fractional, or is it a bit of both?
It's a combination. The core of it is who am I as a person and as a human being through the professional lens. So we're thinking of an angle or a point of view that expresses who we are in a way that's portable. It can't just be my personal brand is I am the leading fractional CMO in the blah, blah, blah vertical. That's not a personal brand. That's a marketing messaging tactic because there's no portability. Today, that's what you do, but tomorrow, what do you do? So personal brand angle and positioning does not answer the question of what do you do? It answers the question of who are you? So that is the first step. Now, where the business comes to play is in the messaging and the content you're creating. So let's say LinkedIn is your platform. Part of the content will be you talking about the industry, perhaps the vertical, your thought leadership, your particular area of expertise. But the biggest mistake people make in this space is still talking about it, not through their personal lens as the thought leader in the space, but rather through their company, be it a company of one, or perhaps they have other people under the umbrella. And that doesn't land or resonate with people. It's easier to build rapport when you're giving your opinion and you say, I, and this is my opinion, and this is my position, and this is what I think. Often we believe that it makes us look more credible when we say we at company ABC believe that, when that comes through a personal channel, like a podcast, like a LinkedIn page, like all of those things, that loses that human connection. So yes, we talk about credibility. It's a big part of what we speak about when we're building our personal brand as leaders, but it has to come from the humanizing component. That is very important.
So maybe, can you give an example off the cuff? So for example, if I say, I'm a fractional CMO, right? That's what I do. And I'm like, all right, let me personalize that. So I go, okay, I'm a fractional CMO. I've worked in e-commerce for the last 25 years, and I'm a coffee and chocolate snob. There, I've added something about myself. Is that what you mean, or is it something more than that?
It's something more than that, and that's where that brand strategy exercise becomes important, because there needs to be something that will tie together you being a fractional CMO and a big chocolate fan. Something needs to tie the two. So when you are going to be creating your content, and I'll give a specific example to make it clear. When you're going to be creating content, let's say it's LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever. You're going to be talking about something that sets your credibility and your thought leadership. So in your case, let's say marketing. And it can be all kinds of different things, right? Your credibility. But then there needs to be something else that you talk about that's not just you talking shop, because that does not build a human connection. And people will buy from other humans, right? Yes, credibility is important, but there needs to be that human connection. However, it can be, so here's where a lot of people get concerned, because they say, well, I don't want to share my personal stuff out there. This is not a question of sharing your personal stuff, because we're not talking about becoming lifestyle influencers on Instagram. It's just sharing something that's not just about the business. So you appear human to people, which you are human. So it creates that humanizing connection. Now, the question is, well, how do I choose that humanizing topic? Because you get to choose. You don't have to share anything overly personal or, your family stuff. You can set the boundaries as you want. How do you choose that humanizing topic? That's where you go through brand exercises to figure out what that common denominator is going to be. Quick example. One of our clients that we've worked with, longtime EO member, Eric Slabaugh, perhaps you know him. He was on the global board for a while, so part of Entrepreneurs Organization. He came to us looking to build his personal brand, his visibility, And we took him through a lot of exercises to understand, well, what are his core values? What does he stand for? What are the common threads throughout all of his entire journey? Because I bet you that if you look, all of you listening or watching, if you go back to your entrepreneurial journey, business journey, leadership journey, it hasn't been a linear path. You've done a whole bunch of different things, right? So you have to look at, well, what is that common denominator and common thread throughout all of that expresses who you are? So in Eric's case, a lot of the things that we had seen were around more of that solid traditional outlook on life and business and everything that he does. You know, he's one of those guys that, you know, handshake over a, you know, signed agreement, or he's the type of guy to invest in gold and not crypto, right? So like that type of guy. And so for him, we came up with an angle of timeless principles. That's his unifying thread of his personal brand, is he stands for timeless principles. Now, the topics that we chose for him are timeless entrepreneurship, timeless principles of entrepreneurship, timeless principles of leadership, so both on credibility, but then he also wanted to talk about his sons. He has 2 sons and he's a devoted father, timeless principles of parenting. So now when he talks about his sons or something he did with one of his sons, it's not a random, why all of a sudden he's talking about his son. This is out of nowhere. It's always timeless principles, and so there's always that connection. And so the goal is to find out what is yours between what fuels your work as a fractional CMO and your love for chocolate. If there's a unifying connection, then of course all topics go.
Yeah, and that's probably a day-long exercise to find that connection between fractional CMO and chocolate. So that's for another discussion. Let's talk about visual. You know, how should somebody, you know, I always struggle with, okay, my LinkedIn picture. I keep going back to LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn picture, should it be professional Robert, you know, dressed in maybe a jacket with a nice shirt? Should it be Robert maybe more like this, where I'm wearing something less formal, but I'm comfortable? And this is probably the kind of thing I'm wearing most days when I'm actually working and maybe on a Zoom with somebody. And then of course, you know, there's COVID era Robert wearing, you know, the t-shirt and bathrobe and working, but I think that's kind of in the past now. But how do you reconcile all that, and where does all that fit into the best practice for personal branding as far as visual goes?
So again, that question is best answered with going through the brand identity exercise, figuring out, well, what do you want your brand to be all about? Because one of the questions that we answer when we go through that process is around brand perception. How do you want to be perceived? And then how do you not want to be perceived? So you might say, I want to be perceived as professional, but not overly stuffy. Well, then you already know not to put that 3-piece suit and put it on all of your photos, because that's not how you want to be perceived. That exercise is extremely powerful because that becomes your quality control, and you can answer those questions when writing a post, when wondering what to wear somewhere, how to, you know, your picture, your visuals, all those things. That's one. But 2, what's really important and powerful is to find something that's going to be your thing visually that people can start associating with you. That makes a huge difference because, again, as I already said, and this goes for any kind of brand, not only personal brand, corporate brand, it's all about associations, right? So when you leverage something that builds that association, so for example, we had one client and for him it was a bow tie. And so we said, okay, well, great. And all of your visuals were put in, you know, even if it's an avatar of you, it's going to have a bow tie. And then every time you go to an event, wear a bow tie. And then if you're going to do a client gift or something, send bow ties, right? So boom, there's that unifying thread. For our common friend, Joe Frost, the owner of your CMO, it's his wild and crazy hair. And so when we worked on his brand through Brand of a Leader, my personal branding agency. And so if you see for him, for his logo, we created an avatar, and really that hair was the cornerstone of that. For other people, it could be a hat, it could be a tie, funky tie. It has to be authentic. It can't be something that's just not you. It has to be authentic. Or for some people, it's the color. It might be a color that they become associated with. For me, it's a splash of red or orange red. And you will see it when I give talks. If I'm giving a presentation, then my nails are red. The back of my laptop is red. My suitcase that I travel with for speaking engagements across the world is red. So it could be color. It could be an item. Visually, it's great to have something also, if you can, that creates creates that association and that recognizability, memorability. However, step one again is to figure out, well, what is the brand and how do you want to be perceived?
I remember being at a network, an in-real person network event, networking event back in the summer, and I met somebody and I didn't know what he did, but he introduced himself, and just, judging the book by its cover, the first 5 seconds, what I see is this guy in his probably 50s, wearing shorts, a heavy metal t-shirt, a lot of facial hair, super long hair, a few piercings. Start talking to him, super nice guy. 2 minutes in, gets to this, so what do you do? And he tells me, I'm a mortgage broker. And it's like a big disconnect, like, what? You're like in a financial industry and you look like that? And it's like, yeah, my side hustle is I play in a heavy metal band and we tour and stuff like that.
You're like, nah, that makes sense.
Right, makes sense. So I wonder, I never went to see his LinkedIn profile, see how he presents himself. Does he present himself like that, but in a suit and tie to really throw people off, or just in the t-shirt?
I hope there's consistency, because see, there's memorability. You probably have met 5 million mortgage advisors, and this is the one that you remembered.
Right.
Now, if he's not the right fit for you, and if you're turned off by that kind of thing, if to you that screams unprofessional, you're not going to work with him. So he will turn off customers. That's the power of any strong marketing and brand. That's fine. But if you are on the side of uniqueness and self-expression, you're going to remember this guy. This is the guy you're going to call when you're looking to give your business to someone. There was a similar story in the U.S. right now. It was all over the news. There was this politician that showed up to the inauguration in shorts, and he got massively criticized. And I said, nobody's going to remember anyone who's there who's not a well-known name. Everyone noticed this guy, right? So he's just been on brand, and his brand is that he's the common folk. I'm just same as everyone else. He stayed on brand. He was memorable. He got criticized for people who are not the right people for him. He got even more loved for people who are right. So it's important to keep that in mind, that there is no right outfit for an industry. If it's a consistent and authentic form of self-expression, then the right people will actually be attracted to that.
Absolutely. Let's get back to tactics a little bit now. So we kind of got the foundations of what it takes to get the brand established. Now let's go back to LinkedIn, and in your experience, what are the right platforms for fractionals to be on to put their brand out there?
So 2 things I recommend the most right now to fractionals. Number 1, definitely LinkedIn, because it's the lowest hanging fruit. In that, if you are consistent on LinkedIn, meaning you're posting twice a week. Hey, good news, you're not posting twice a day, right? Which some of the other platforms require. On X, you have to be posting 15, 25 tweets, as it X is now, a day. On Instagram, it has to be a daily reel for you to start gaining any traction if you're not putting ad dollars behind it. On LinkedIn, twice a week, you're going to have consistent visibility. So the trick is you are consistently sending invitation requests to people who are relevant to you. So let's say prospective customers, you can segment geographically, however you want. You just send them invitation to connect, but you don't follow up with an email offering a meet and greet, a call to discover synergies, or anything like that, because that's a turnoff and that's brand damaging. So you just send invitations to connecting with like-minded people. You don't even have to say anything. That needs to be a consistent practice, because that's how you grow your network. Then you post on LinkedIn twice a week, and it's a combination, and you alternate it. There's a post that's credibility, and that's where people get nuggets of wisdom. They get value from that post. And then you alternate it with something more humanizing and more personal. It can still be work related, but it can be a client win, which you're just genuinely, excited. You're sharing your emotion, just your human side. You're proud of something. You landed a client. You're disappointed. You lost the client. Just you're showing your human side, not just your brain, but your heart and soul. You do that twice a week. You're going to go to the top of people's feeds. You're going to start becoming memorable to people. And then after you've been connected for a couple of months, then you can send an direct message and say, hey, been connected for a couple of months. Would love to chat, learn more about your organization. Hopefully by then the person has noticed your content, so it doesn't feel as cold. You're warming up that outreach. A second thing that I recommend that works really well is guesting on podcasts. That is the best thing, the lowest hanging fruit, the biggest ROI on your time you can get, because unlike a speaking engagement, you can't really prepare for it because you don't know the question. So you just need to, already be prepared as you are. So you don't have to prepare for it. You show up for a 1-hour conversation What do you get from that? The host is going to post first of all, you practice your speaking points, you practice your public speaking, you refine your thinking because often you ask similar questions. So all that is just great, professional, personal development, that's great. In addition to that, the host is going to post that episode, on a couple of different platforms. That's your SEO, fantastic, because those are legit links. But number 3, the real gold, and that's what people miss out on when they say, oh, I don't want to be on this podcast. It doesn't have a lot of downloads or a lot of visibility. Who cares? Don't be a diva. You get that footage, which is priceless. That's you for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, saying things out of which at least a couple are going to be smart. So you can take that snippet, hopefully. So that's why I said a couple. Didn't say the whole, I didn't say 60 minutes of smart footage. A couple of things are going to be smart. You're going to take that, extract it, and that's other content you can post on, let's say LinkedIn, if that's your platform, so that it's not just static, you write and post, but there's also some video there too. Podcast guesting is fantastic.
So there's probably at least more than one person right now listening and cringing at the idea that they have to write content, right? A lot of people are like, content, I don't want to be bothered. I don't have the time. I don't know where to start. I suck at writing. And then the next thought, not too far behind, is probably, oh, I'll use AI. I'll use ChatGPT. I'll use Claude, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So talk to me about why it's probably not the best idea to just rely on AI to do it, and maybe some tricks as to how to get started to get that written content going.
Yeah, you were absolutely right in that is the biggest bottleneck for people. So you're completely on point with that. Again, first of all, what does help, because often it's not just the question of shoot me, I don't want to write, but it's I don't know what to write. So again, when you figure out that strategy and your core topics and what you're going to be writing about, on a macro level, that is really, really helpful, because every time you sit down in front of, an empty post screen and write here, start here, that's hard. So that piece is helpful. On a more pragmatic level, AI is not fully there yet. It's obvious when somebody had an AI generated post is brand and credibility damaging, and oh my God, even more so if you are in the fractional space as a marketer. When I see those, and then those fractional marketers reach out to me, and I'm like, no, you're gonna do the same to me, no. So that's not good. AI is fantastic. I use Claude all the time and ChatGPT every single day. How can it help? So number 1, you can't have it generate your thought leadership. So I can't go to it and say, I want to write a post about 3 reasons why CEOs or fractional professionals need a personal brand. And then it tells me they need a personal brand because ABC. Well, that's like, first of all, to me, that just feels how insulting to other people's time that they have to go and read something that's just, there's just no thought, there's no expertise. It just almost feels like plagiarism to me, right? So at the very least, if you're using a tool, feed it your thinking. Again, that's why podcasting is so great, because sometimes you're not sure what question to answer, what is your thinking. So if you have that transcript of a podcast interview that you did, then you can feed it into, let's say, Claude or ChatGPT, whatever tool you're using, and then you can extract the post from there that at least now it's based on your thought leadership, your actual thoughts, your actual brain. Once that post is extracted for you, you cannot go and copy and paste it. Do not do that. It sounds AI still, and the technology is improving at rapid pace, and maybe it's going to continue to do so, but it's still clunky and it sounds like that. You do need to do a heavy edit. So either you do a heavy edit or you hire someone to do it. It's a service we offer at Brand of a Leader, shameless plug. That's exactly what we help with. But somebody needs to be there. It likely will not be your VA. It needs to be somebody who can wordsmith and who can make things sound like you, but it's a strong editor that you still need. However, as I said, podcasting helps because then it already gives you content that you're repurposing. And if you're just not somebody you're not a writer, you hate that type of thing, well then rely on the video clips and write just a line, 2 lines, so then people can watch the video clips. And when you upload a video clip, make sure it has captions, because a lot of people miss that and it's critical.
The dead giveaways in any post, it's been written by AI whenever you see the word robust or Foster.
There's a list.
And there's others, but those are the ones that trigger me like, oh no, that's a
And it's
real.
so bad. I did that. I shared at one point a short list within our Slack channel with the team saying we can no longer use those. We can no longer use the rocket ship emoji in the first line. And we had a client who like everything was rocket ship emojis and we can't do that anymore. And people are really sad. Like, I really like this word. I love this word. I love this emoji. Canceled because now you can be human, but people are going to think it's AI.
So, all right. So we talk about written content, video content, of course, even more powerful than written content. For some people, even more challenging to do to get in front of a camera. It's like worse than going to the dentist for the root canal for a lot of people. What are the tips on doing that? I mean, I've heard, the tip I've always heard is don't fuss, don't muss. Turn on your phone. Don't worry about studio quality. Just do it. And that's already way ahead. You're already way ahead of the game.
Yes, if you can, yes. It does not have to be. So the one thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to overproduce it. So actually, when it looks very polished and very perfect, people keep scrolling because that looks to them like corporate content and not human. So you don't want to overproduce it. You don't want to rent a studio and have somebody film you and over-edit it. It's actually going to be really disappointing because you'll spend all this money and then you'll say, this kind of content doesn't work. However, most people are not comfortable just turning on the camera and speaking into it. I do a lot of speaking. I get paid to speak, globally. I'm very fortunate. I do podcasting. But if I just have to turn on a camera and speak into it, like I struggle. It's weird. It's not natural. Like, what do I say? Do I emote into it like I normally do? But there's nobody there, so I feel weird. So it's hard. That's why, again, podcast guesting. Not necessarily launching your own podcast. That's a lot of work. I'm sure you know that. But when you are going on as a guest on a podcast, that's the host's work. You get to benefit from that. That's your video content. And if you're still, cringy, you're not amazing, well, the more you do it, the better you're going to get. That is the easiest way of generating video content. The easiest, being a guest on podcasts.
Thought leadership. So the big buzzword, thought leadership, right? Post on LinkedIn twice a week to establish thought leadership. I hear that a lot. So talk to me about what exactly does that mean? What does thought leadership mean? What's the KPI? How do you know when you've achieved thought leadership?
Yeah, it's an overused term, right? Because to have thought leadership, you really need to be a leader of some kind of thinking in a specific field, not necessarily just great and have your expertise. So we can replace that. And unless you have some, groundbreaking research that you've generated and you're creating real thought leadership in the space, we can replace it with expertise. There has to be a topic on which you can share expertise in a way that's interesting and valuable to people. And then it also releases the pressure of like thought leadership, right? It is used right now interchangeably for better or for worse, but it releases the pressure if we say, well, I'm just going to share my expertise. I want to give value to people. I want people to learn something from what I'm sharing. If that's our intent and intention, then that helps. And then what the thought leadership is in, or that expertise is in, that's another very important question, right? Because we're not always the expert in the vertical or in the vocation that we're selling, right? What if we have a team of fractional professionals, let's say in marketing? So we are not on the cutting edge of marketing. We are on the cutting edge of building an incredible team of professionals who can help with marketing. So in that case, we're sharing our expertise on building that kind of a team rather than starting to share some marketing insights that we're not entirely confident in. And that's an important distinction to make as well, because when we're sharing expertise, it has to be reflective our daily reality and what we have become and are continuing to become masters of.
How do you know when you're doing it right? How do you measure it? What are the KPIs to measure personal branding success?
So it depends on your goals. So let's say if my goals is to get more clients, and my visibility is generating clients, then I go check mark. So if I go and deliver a talk and at the end people sign up to learn more about Brand of a Leader and then become clients, then it means that my talk brought value and I'm doing well. Same with LinkedIn content, everything else. I know that my personal brand has grown when those invitations start coming to me instead of me chasing them. When I'm invited to speak, when people are approaching me with opportunities, when people are inviting me to be on a podcast, that means a stronger personal brand, which means stronger recognizability of my name and clarity on what it is that I'm looking for. Example, if you're looking to, well, for example, if you're looking to be doing more public speaking, that's your goal for 2025. Well, it has to be clear to people because those opportunities can't come to you if people don't know that that's what you're positioning yourself for. So you need to start all of a sudden, one of your content pillars, let's say on LinkedIn, needs to be about public speaking. You're mentioning public speaking, you're over-indexing and talking about the talks that you've had. You have to be focusing on that. If your goal is to generate clients, well, then that's the focus. Talk about the clients that you have. Talk about whether you have space for more clients. Talk about client-related work so people start associating you and the types of clients you work with. Because often opportunities don't come to us just because people don't know that that's exactly what we're offering. There's that lack of clarity, or we're not top of mind for people. That's why a strong LinkedIn strategy is great, because you're going to meet people. So let's say if this mortgage guy, if he's on LinkedIn, you met him, you remembered him, but a year from now, you might be like, who's that guy? What's his name? What was that, right? Like, where's his card? I don't know. Well, if that guy's on your LinkedIn and he's regularly posting content, well, then when time comes, you're going to reach out to him, right? So that's the goal, and the idea is it needs to be clear who you are so people connect emotionally, what you do, and then also what are you positioning yourself for, what are your goals, so then people can align themselves with them. And then the KPI becomes, well, those goals are met, right? If your goals are getting clients, you're getting clients. If your goals are, I don't know, board seats, you're being invited on board seats. And then the frequency of the opportunities that come to you versus you having to seek them out shows the strength of your essentially personal brand equity.
So it's the good old begin with the end in mind. What's your goal? And then work backwards from there to craft your strategy so that it helps you work towards those goals.
So you start with who you are. That will dictate your brand strategy. And then for your marketing, absolutely, as you said, what are the goals? And then we work backwards. Absolutely.
What's coming down the pipeline? What you look in your crystal ball? What's in the next couple of years? What's going to change in the world of personal branding that's particularly going to affect the fractional space? What do you see out there?
The dominance and popularity and the need for personal branding is growing, and it's not going to go away. So if you're in the camp that you feel this is gimmick and it's going to go away, it's not. Listen, it's becoming even more important than the age of AI and deepfake. I have a contact. He's a business owner and he's very active on social media, very active. And the other day he ran a post that said that somebody was using deepfake to get people on Zoom calls pretending to be him and requesting some sensitive information, and it was believable enough. So he was able to write that post to quickly get to his network to warn people and create that layer of protection for himself, but also for his network. So that ability to communicate to people directly, it's incredible. That ability it's also a shield against getting canceled. I think the cancel culture is on the growth. It's not less than that. And why it's a shield, people often say, they see it the opposite. They say, well, I'm going to say something wrong and I'm going to get canceled. People will always find something to, dislike about us or vilify. But when people know us and they know what we stand for, those reputation damaging claims are less likely to land because people know us. So that becomes really important as well. So with the age of AI, with the cancel culture, with the consistently decreasing trust that people have in corporations and corporate messaging, personal human messaging becomes much stronger. In the age of depersonalization, that human connection and human content and human messaging becomes even more important. So my biggest prediction that I will give is it's only growing in importance. It's fascinating. It started with influencers. Then it was CEOs. Now it's executives. Of course, it's solopreneurs, including fractional executives, because it just makes business easier.
So you've given a lot of great tips. And so now I might be sitting here like, all right, I've got all my questions answered about personal branding. Now I'm feeling completely overwhelmed. Where do I start? What's the first step? I want to nail this, but there's just too much. Where do I go? What do I do?
I got it for you. So the first question you want to have answered is, so what's going to be my brand? What am I all about? What's going to be my timeless principles, right? The equivalent of that. What's going to be my thing? I'm going to give you 2 exercises that help you get closer to answering that question. The first exercise, as a former Entrepreneurs Organization member, you're very familiar with this one, is the lifeline. And that's the exercise we take all of our clients through. So what you do, for our viewers and listeners who are not familiar, is you sit down and you map out your entire life from as early as you remember yourself to today, business and personal. You map out all of the highs and all of the lows, but you remove your overachiever hat, and it's not the highs and the lows through the lens of somebody else who would determine whether this is significant. The most significant moments, highs and lows, to you. It could have been, I don't know, you moved schools in grade 6 and this really affected you. Why? This happened to you. Why? That happened. Why? Then when you look at all of those highs and lows, you sit down and you start searching for patterns. What are the patterns? What are the common denominators? After you make the list of those patterns, those themes in your life and in your journey, then you take one of them and you wordsmith it to become your thing, your equivalent of timeless principles. A second exercise is core values. So figuring out what are your true, no matter what, sometimes does not serve you, as Pat Lencioni says, core values have the ability of inflicting pain. So sometimes can pain you, but they're your true core values no matter what. If you have 1, that's fine. It's still better than 0. You don't need 25. And that core value, that might become, again, with wordsmithing, that might become your angle. When you figure out your angle or your unique point of view, that thing that really expresses who you are, that is the first step. That's the magic, because that everything builds from that. And then you feel more confident to put yourself out there because there's just clarity. There's just this unifying thing that ties everything together. So that's step 1. Then after that, everything follows step 1. And those are the 2 exercises that work very well with that.
Nice. I love the concrete, actionable takeaways right there. That is awesome, Marina. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. Where can people find you?
LinkedIn. As I said, I'm fortunate to have an unpronounceable last name, but if you copy and paste it into LinkedIn, I'm the only Marina Byezhanova there. I respond to every single message. So if ever you have a question, something wasn't clear, you'd like a concrete example, or you would love to chat about building your brand, I would be happy to connect.
Thanks, Marina.
Thank you so much for having me, Robert.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. If you're a fractional professional based in Canada, we'd love to have you join us in the Fractional Pros Canada Facebook group, the home for Canada's fractional community. It's where Canadian fractional executives connect, share insights, and help each other succeed. Until next time, I'm Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO. May your impact be full-time, even if your hours are fractional.